Good evening. Tonight, the world watches the Middle East stand on the edge of a knife. On one side, diplomatic negotiations. On the other, the very real possibility of military conflict. At the center of it all, the United States, Iran, Israel, and a global shipping corridor that, if closed, could shake economies from Washington to Beijing. We begin with a developing situation in the Strait of Hormuz and the high-stakes nuclear talks now underway in Geneva, Switzerland. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy launched a major naval exercise this week, describing it as a simulation of strategic control of the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea. According to reports from Tehran, the exercise included scenarios simulating the seizure of vessels in this critical shipping corridor. On any given day, nearly 100 ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz carrying oil, liquefied natural gas, and commercial cargo that supply energy and goods to markets around the world. Any disruption, even temporary, would send shockwaves through the global economy. The timing of this exercise is no accident. It comes just one day before a new round of nuclear negotiations between Iran and the United States resumed in Geneva. Is Tehran sending a message to Washington at the negotiating table? Analysts believe the answer is yes. Washington's response was swift and unmistakable. In the Arabian Sea, off the coast of Oman, a United States Navy strike group led by the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln conducted coordinated maneuvers involving 7 vessels sailing in a single formation. Guided missile destroyers flanked the carrier as supply ships maintained formation, a display of precision, readiness, and reach. But that is not the only carrier in play. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest warship ever built, is currently moving toward the eastern Mediterranean Sea and is expected to be in position near the Syrian coastline within approximately 2 weeks. When combined with existing naval assets, analysts say this concentration of force represents nearly 1/3 of all deployed operational United States naval power worldwide, converging in one region: the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean. In addition to the carriers, the United States has deployed additional combat aircraft squadrons to bases in the region, including Qatar, Jordan, and Cyprus. Terminal High-Altitude Area Defense Systems, known as THAAD, along with Patriot missile batteries, have been positioned to protect American installations and allied nations, including Israel, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. President Donald Trump addressed reporters directly this week, leaving little to interpretation. He stated that if diplomatic talks fail to produce results, it will be a bad day for Iran. He added that he is deploying a second aircraft carrier because, in case a deal is not reached, it will be needed. When asked about the possibility of regime change in Tehran, the president suggested it might be the best possible outcome. Secretary of State Marco Rubio followed with a more measured tone, clarifying that the president's preference remains a diplomatic solution, but acknowledged that reaching an agreement with Tehran is, in his words, not simple. Iran's foreign minister arrived in Geneva on Monday ahead of the second round of indirect talks with the United States. The negotiations are being mediated by Oman and are taking place without direct face-to-face contact between the two delegations. On the American side, the team includes senior envoys with close ties to the White House. Iran's deputy foreign minister offered some signals of flexibility this week, indicating Tehran could consider diluting its enriched uranium stockpile, currently estimated at over 400 kilograms, from a purity level of 60% to a lower threshold. However, he was unequivocal on 2 major points. Iran will not agree to zero uranium enrichment, and its ballistic missile program is entirely off the table for negotiation. Iranian officials argue that their missile arsenal is a defensive capability, one they say protects the state. One senior official pointedly questioned how any government could agree to dismantle its own defenses. Iran's foreign minister also met with the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency in Geneva, signaling some degree of openness to oversight. However, Iranian officials were clear. They will not surrender to pressure. Tehran says it is waiting for Washington to demonstrate political seriousness. Meanwhile, Iranian military commanders issued stern warnings this week, stating that any military confrontation with Iran would be costly for those who initiate it. These statements have become routine in times of heightened tension, though analysts caution that the line between rhetoric and intent can blur quickly in this environment. Away from the negotiating rooms and naval maneuvers, Iran's interior is under enormous strain. In January, large-scale protests erupted across multiple Iranian cities. The demonstrations were met with a severe government crackdown. Human rights organizations and independent journalists report that thousands of protesters were detained and that hundreds have since been sentenced, some reportedly through accelerated legal proceedings with limited access to legal representation. Reports also indicate that families of detainees have received notifications regarding their loved ones, though the full scope of the crackdown remains difficult to verify, as Iran restricts independent media access. The Iranian government has denied reports of mass casualties and extrajudicial actions. Meanwhile, Iran's broader economic situation remains deeply troubled. Inflation continues to erode purchasing power. The national currency has lost significant value. Water shortages persist in major cities. Air quality in urban centers remains a chronic public health concern. The combination of external military pressure and internal economic strain is placing the Iranian leadership in an increasingly difficult position, one that may ultimately shape the outcome of the Geneva talks more than any statement from either side. In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated this week that he is giving the United States' proposed framework a genuine chance, but made clear that military options remain fully available should diplomacy fail. Israeli defense analysts and Air Force assessments suggest Iran maintains an arsenal of approximately 1,800 ballistic missiles. Contingency planning in Israel includes the possibility of simultaneous threats from multiple fronts, including Lebanon, Gaza, Yemen, and Iran directly. Reports citing American officials indicate that during a meeting late last year, President Trump informed the Israeli Prime Minister that Washington would support Israeli military action against Iran's ballistic missile infrastructure if no diplomatic agreement is reached. Discussions about logistical support, including aerial refueling and overflight approvals, are said to be ongoing, though several regional states, including Jordan and Saudi Arabia, have publicly stated they will not permit their airspace to be used for any such operation. In the West Bank, Israeli defense forces have reinforced their presence in recent days, citing concerns that Iran may attempt to ignite unrest in the territory as a pressure tactic, opening a second front to divert Israeli and American attention during the nuclear negotiations. The month of Ramadan is approaching, a period historically associated with heightened tensions in the region. Israeli security officials say they are preparing for a wide range of scenarios during this period. In the Gaza Strip, Israeli forces conducted targeted operations this week following what officials described as violations of the existing ceasefire agreement. Israeli authorities confirmed the elimination of several individuals, including one identified as having participated in the October 7, 2023 attacks. Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the broader strategic question directly. Hamas must fully disarm, rifles included, within 60 days, or Israel will resume military operations at full intensity with the objective of permanent demilitarization. Hamas has thus far rejected calls to surrender its weapons, framing disarmament as incompatible with what it describes as the right to resistance. The organization continues to receive funding from external sources, which, according to Israeli and American intelligence assessments, is being used to rearm. President Trump announced plans to introduce a $5 billion humanitarian and reconstruction initiative for Gaza, along with a proposal for an international stabilization force and a locally administered civilian police presence. Italy has signaled readiness to contribute by training a new civilian police force and participating as an observer in peace council discussions. The outline of a potential post-conflict governance structure is beginning to take shape, but its viability rests entirely on whether Hamas is willing or compelled to disarm. Tonight, the Middle East sits at an intersection of diplomacy and force. The Strait of Hormuz remains open, but it is being watched. The talks in Geneva continue, but the gaps between the parties remain wide. Israel prepares for eventualities it hopes will not come, and millions of people from Tehran to Gaza City to Tel Aviv wait. The question now is not whether pressure exists. It is whether that pressure will produce an agreement or an explosion. We will continue to monitor all developments and bring you the facts as they emerge. Stay informed. Good night.